Welcome to this episode of Acclime Conversations, an interview series where we get to learn the stories behind the business community and the individuals and the success in Vietnam. In this episode, I'll be interviewing Stefano Pellegrino, co-founder and country manager of Vietnam for Aspire. Great to have you with us, Stefano. Welcome.
Hi, Matthew. It's a pleasure being here with you today, and thank you for inviting.
Fantastic. I'm going to start this discussion to learn a bit more about the story to where you are and how you've come to lead the Fintech that is Aspire, and we'll learn more about that shortly. But a bit about your professional story, your journey to where you are today. Enlighten us about how you've got to where you are, and then we'll go into the Aspire, the sort of exciting business that you lead.
Of course. Well, so my background is a legal background. I am a New York lawyer. I studied law and I practice in a few big international law firms. Then my story is that of a career shift that led me to abandon the law and move and embrace fintech. But I would say that the career background that I have it really is useful for what I do today. I studied law in Europe first. I got my degree there, and then I did my Master of Law in California. Which was really eye-opening, right? The way in which the law and how society works is so different in the US. And then I pursued my dream, which was at some point to become a New York lawyer. So after my master, I became a lawyer in New York. And then from there, I started working for international law firms, doing mostly M&A, joint ventures, and corporate work. Which again was really eye-opening in understanding a bit how this world works. And then I moved to Vietnam, and that was 7 years ago. Mark Fraser, who's a legend in the Vietnam legal environment, he brought me to Vietnam in 2014 to work with his law firm, Fraser's Law Company, and working with international companies doing business in and out of Vietnam. That was very interesting because when I was working for an American law firm in Europe, I realized that the same structure, the same framework that guide corporate law and how business is done in the US and in Europe is the same as in Southeast Asia, right? When you do a big transaction, you identify the customer in the same way, you do due diligence, the contracts are always the same, maybe 5, maybe 10, but it's kind of the same framework that applies worldwide. Contracts are in English, they follow certain standards, and I found it so fascinating to really be able to use my background, the law, to travel around the world and experience how the profession works in such different settings. So I would say that's a few words about my past.
And so what was the journey then from professional lawyer working at one of the most renowned law firms going to a startup, a fintech, a sector you hadn't worked in? That was a big gap, a big change for you. What was the thinking behind that, and how comfortable and how much of a shock was that? And the driver behind that? I'm really interested to learn of that movement across from lawyer to fintech entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I think that one of the beautiful things of being a lawyer is the exposure that it gives you to the business environment as a whole, right? Understanding how companies are created, how companies are sold, and it's also understanding that if you work for a small company, a startup that is in the right sector, doing the right thing at the right moment, the value that you can create is really huge. So I think that having seen that over and over, right, having been advising successful startups in Europe before, but also in Vietnam, and seeing how Airbnb started small, but then you see where they get, right? Kind of opened my mind as to where opportunities really are, and so that was probably the first point. Secondly, the learning. Like after 10 years practicing law, obviously you're never done learning, right? But I have seen a few things. And instead, I was fascinated by the idea of embracing something completely new. And when the opportunity arose with Aspire to understand fintech, I just jumped in. So I would say that the mantra that I like, stay hungry, stay foolish, I kind of followed that, and I really wanted to be hungry and learn more. Then the opportunity presented itself when a friend of mine, Andrea, he's the founder of Aspire, and a person that I admire immensely and I followed throughout his stages. He was in the founding team of Lazada, which is a huge e-commerce platform in Southeast Asia. He helped build the platforms from scratch and was in the management team until 2018, when the company was sold to Alibaba for $2 billion. So I was following him, and he always mentored me a little bit. Interesting thing about the startup environment, he's younger than me, but I was always looking up at him, and I still do, and he's my boss. But really understand that age is not, it doesn't mean much. And True. This is also a nice difference from instead the law firm environment, where it's much more hierarchical, and age matters a lot, right? And so I saw him starting Aspire from scratch, going to California with Y Combinator, getting the first round of funding, the second round of funding, and then he finally approached me saying, "Look, we're coming to Vietnam, and we need someone to start things there from scratch." So that was the beginning of the journey, and I was like, "Well, there's a lot I have to learn, but happy to do it." So
Fantastic. So that leads us into what is Aspire, what you were trying to achieve, and sort of the background behind Aspire, because it's probably unknown to many. Many use it. It's a great sort of platform. But teach us about what Aspire is and what you were trying to achieve as you're developing the platform.
Of course. So Aspire started as a digital bank for small, medium enterprises, right? Based in Singapore, headquartered in Singapore, but with offices also in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand. It developed, however, to something that goes way beyond the simple concept of digital banking. But it has built an all-in-one finance solution for small and medium enterprises. What does it mean? It means that it brings together software and banks that are normally two very separate things, right? Through an all-in-one operating system that allows to have one platform, one interface that is used for all the financial needs of a company, normally a small, medium enterprise in Southeast Asia. Let me give you an example. Normally, an SME, a small, medium enterprise, has 6-7 different providers for their banking and financial needs. They have a bank account with a bank, maybe more bank accounts.
more than one normally, yes.
Then they have credit solutions. They get credit either from their shareholders or maybe from some of these banks, maybe different banks or different providers. They have different service providers for foreign exchange when they need to move money cross-border. Maybe they work with TransferWise or with other players. Then they have invoice management, which is separate, payroll management, also different software, accounting, expense management. It's just very complex. What Aspire does is it brings it all together into one platform, right? So we issue to our customers, normally the business account is the first product, right? Which comes automatically when we help, for example, a company to incorporate in Singapore. They can incorporate through our platform. It's extremely fast. It's done online. It takes 2-3 days. You don't need to go to Singapore in person. And this comes with a business account, which is also free. You don't have setup fees. You don't have fees to maintain it. You don't have to keep minimum amount. It can be zero. It just comes automatically, all done online, just in a few hours. And then from there, we offer a credit card. We offer a digital debit card. We offer credit solutions when needed. We offer foreign exchange. We are integrated with multiple FX providers. So this allows a company to move money around the region at a rate that is normally much cheaper than those offered from banks. And this is all done in cooperation with, obviously, banks in the different countries where we operate, to which we are connected through open API. So what does it mean? This means that through one platform, an SME can have access to all of these services seamlessly. They don't need to log into their bank account, a digital bank account, make a transfer, transfer the money maybe to TransferWise, to then make another transfer for foreign exchange, and send it to Singapore, where it will then put the money on the debit card that their executive use when they're traveling. It's all connected. Sure. And the same goes now with invoice management, which is another big thing that we have recently launched, and we are expanding fast. It allows, when you receive an invoice, right, a PDF, to have it automatically included into your accounting system, right? It just recorded, you take a screenshot, it goes there, and it same applies for invoices that you need to pay. You can also issue invoices. The reminders are automatic. So once again, it's the dream of any CFO or startup founder.
So how does, and in the Vietnam environment, how are the challenges different? You mentioned Singapore was the start and you've gone to different countries. With your focus on Vietnam, what are the differences in how that works in practice and the challenges versus Singapore, which is a much more open environment?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. Well, first of all, you need to find the right partners, right? We work with several very reputable Vietnamese banks, but I would say not every bank in Vietnam has the infrastructure to be able to support, open API integration, and therefore to allow this kind of connections. So this is one constraint, if you want, right? Not too many partners to start with. On the other hand, there is another difference with Singapore, which is the size of this market, right, and the opportunity. There are more than 700,000 small medium enterprises in Vietnam, and compared to Singapore, the numbers just don't add up. There is a huge potential in Vietnam, and this is why we're growing so fast in this country. So we are in Indonesia, for example. The third point I would say is startups. Aspire is obsessively focused on startups and serving startup companies. Why? Because they are the fastest growing, because there is a lot of capital that is allowing these ecosystems to really grow. We see that in Vietnam, right, with tens of thousands of startups blossoming and becoming also considerable in size. These are companies that need someone that can understand their needs, that can provide these kind of solutions, and most of all, that can help them scale across the region, right? Which is exactly what Aspire does. If you are in Vietnam, and we have several startups that started with us in Vietnam, and now they have expanded. They have an office in Singapore, an office in Indonesia, an office in Thailand, and they're growing. And we provide exactly this kind of support from the incorporation of the headquarters to connecting all-in-ones, their finances. And so, Vietnam is particularly vibrant. So we have a lot of customers in the startup segment, and this is why we're so focused on this country.
And that sort of leads into the next part about how the pandemic. Now we're in this opening phase, reopening in Vietnam. There are still restrictions, but opening up. Things are coming back to a new normal. We had a severe lockdown in much of the country. How did that change your business? Did it impact it? Is it a positive? How did it affect your customers to the point where, do they need you more or less? How was that pandemic sort of flowed for the Aspire Vietnam side of things?
Yeah, well, it definitely disrupted things, right? Not being able to go to the office for several months, that was one. And also seeing a lot of companies and customers around us struggling was really painful, and a lot of people really having a hard time. When it comes to Aspire business, it was not a setback, because again we work digitally, so the team was working remotely from home, not an issue, and also the services that we provide are online. So the disruption was minimal. Actually, it helped in the sense that two things happened during the pandemic. First of all, there is a big inflow of money towards startups across the region, right? And this hasn't stopped with the pandemic. Actually, it has accelerated. So our customers are growing faster, and they have more means every month more. Secondly, helping companies moving cross-border was also an advantage during the pandemic, because while Vietnam, for example, paused its activities for a few months, instead activities were flourishing in other countries. And so helping this transition was actually a plus for us and our customers. So overall, we kept growing actually, and our headcount increased a lot during the pandemic, which is a good sign.
It's always fun trying to bring someone on virtually when you don't have an office during a pandemic, and yeah, it's a challenge that we're probably not taught at any other time in our careers how to do that. So I can understand. Fintech in Vietnam. So where do you see fintech growing? It's a buzzword at the moment. There are examples of great successes, but it's something which is on the tip of people's tongue. But where do you actually see it? Where does it fit in, and how do you see the growth in Vietnam and the adaptation of fintech as as the mainstream almost moving forward?
Well, I think that it's starting. Like the future it's here, but I think that what we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg, right? large digital payment companies that are flourishing, traditional banks that are becoming more and more online and trying to provide the digital services to their customers. And this is just the beginning. There are a lot of startups, that are combining fintech aspects and bringing fintech to several parts of reality and businesses, right? We have companies that are helping the supply chain, logistics in different sectors, and they often try to combine fintech solutions into their services, right? For example, you see it with Grab. That's a great example.
The everything app.
They do delivery, but then they also help finance their own drivers. And if you sell cars, you want to have a loan attached to it. So it really comes to bringing ecosystems together. Another example is payroll, right? We have a lot of startups in Vietnam that are starting managing payrolls for companies, and then you can attach products to that. For example, loans to employees that are backed by the salary that is paid monthly. So I think that this fintech revolution that is ongoing is going to be extremely pervasive and really touch upon a lot of segments in across Vietnamese society.
And we see that evolution, and the pandemic has, I think, accelerated that. So I think for your business and the Aspire, I think it's a great, platform, sort of step up moving forward and changing people's mindsets. So how do you attract customers? Where's your positioning? You mentioned startups are those you try to attract because it fits into the ethos of sort of this starting afresh, do it fintech, this online, bring everything together. But how do you get to them? How do you understand potential customers, market to them, bring them on, and attract those, your future growth? How are you doing that?
Well, that's interesting. An interesting feature of startups is that normally they grow in clusters, right? They grow around an accelerator, an open space office. They grow around VCs and maybe private equity funds that kind of bring them together. And this is why we talk about an ecosystem, right? So the beautiful thing is also that the ecosystem is expanding, but it's also not too vast. So when you have a product that works, word of mouth is incredibly fast at spreading, right? And we have, for example, startup founders that start working with us and they recommend us to their friends and founders of other startups. So I think that this facilitates a lot how we get customers on board, if it makes sense.
And is that something that's going to be your backbone in the future, or is there a broader advertising mainstream, making Aspire more mainstream, or does this niche actually have enough runway for the time being and that works for your business model?
Well, we really think that startups is our focus because it's the future. We see startups coming up and disrupting entire segments. Look at e-commerce, right? Companies such as Lazada, Tiki, and they are disrupting the whole e-commerce and retail marketplaces. But then you also have the same in logistics. You have that in transportation, in food delivery. So you would say, is it better to work with 1,000 restaurants or with one platform that is going to replace them all? Obviously, the second one is the option, right? Does it mean that we only work with startups? No, we also work with more traditional companies, right? That we can still support. But if you ask, our focus is on these. We call them. It's not correct to just say startups. We call them high growth companies. Companies that can really grow, 30-50% per annum or more. And yeah, so that's where our bet is, and it's a successful one so far.
Perfect. So if I asked you to describe, to pick one word that best describes the fintech sector in Vietnam, what would that one word be?
I would say vibrant, because definitely it's not something settled. It's something constantly changing and moving, right? From a regulatory perspective, markets perspective, market share, but again, vibrant because it's extremely exciting. The players are exciting. The people that are working in it are extremely interesting. So that's how I would say. Vibrant.
Okay, and you mentioned the word there, regulatory. How have you dealt with the regulatory issues in Vietnam? You've got a legal background. You've come from sort of this a very well-trained background dealing with legislation and dealing with law. But Vietnam, as you know from your experience, regulation can be frustrating. How have you dealt with that?
Well, of course, one advantage is that as a software service provider, we have quite a good range of freedom, right, to offer our services to established credit institutions and banks and integrate with them and help provide our software to make their services better. So this is definitely helpful. But I would say, also my background as a lawyer was definitely a plus. I'm thinking about establishing connections with these reputable banks, building up partnership agreements, which is obviously complex, and that was helpful. The other thing is the regulatory environment is also moving fast, right? There are new licenses being issued, new regulation constantly on the go. And we see this as extremely beneficial because it means that this ecosystem that we are connected to will continue growing in the coming years. Exciting times ahead.
Fantastic. So let's look to the future, about exciting times ahead. For the Aspire Group, what's next? You've done a range of fundraising. You've done quite a few rounds already of fundraising. What's next? Where are you actually going to take this into the future is it going to go global? Is it going to focus on particular regions? What's going to happen as we see Aspire from an outsider looking in? What are we going to see in the near future?
Yeah, so you are correct. You mentioned the fundraising round. We just raised $100 million in debt capital and $58 million in equity. And the mandate is precisely to bring our solution all over Southeast Asia. Our focus is Southeast Asia at the moment because we consider this as an incredible market with a lot of potential. Solutions like this one of Aspire, we can already see them in Europe, we can see them in the United States. They are now starting in South America, but Southeast Asia is quite virgin from this point of view, right? Lots of opportunities here. So what will we do? We will go deeper in terms of product, completing our integration with, for example, existing software and accounting management systems, bringing more products to our customers, and then expanding geographically in order to cover the entire Southeast Asian region. Where to from there, we'll see. It will probably be a chapter we will explore after the next fundraising round.
Fantastic. Well, it's an exciting story, Stefano, and I really appreciate you spending the time with us on this Acclime Conversations. I'm looking forward to seeing where you grow, and I'm looking forward to our clients using the Aspire platform, because I think there's a lot of opportunities for the startup and the high growth business community to use what you're developing, and I look forward to it. So, Stefano, thank you very much. Is there anything, before we say goodbye, anything else you'd like to say to close off this conversation?
I would just thank you a lot for this opportunity. It was great having this chat, and again, also great to be part of the community that you're building with Acclime. It's a privilege to be part of it, and we hope we will be able to contribute to this community and its users going forward. So thank you, man.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. That's Stefano Pellegrino, who's the co-founder and country manager for Vietnam for Aspire, and it's been great having a conversation with him. Join us for our next Acclime Conversations, and until then, goodbye.
Bye.